Hi loves, my name is Ariane, I'm a French illustrator. Thank you for tuning into my YouTube channel. I recently launched an illustration collection and I thought, since I didn't film any footage at all when I was painting the paintings of the collection, I thought that I would paint a little thank you card that I will be sending out to everyone who purchases a painting on my shop, and use this as an opportunity to show you how I use watercolors and paints to paint my illustrations. The first step that I take is that I always try to have first drawing a doodle, a sketch that I do in my sketchbook, in my secret sketchbook. I used to never draw a preliminary sketch before I did a painting, and as it turns out, I learned the hard way that, it's good to have a preliminary sketch, because sometimes you do a painting and your technique is good but the sketch is wonky or not as you would like, and it just ruins the painting when the sketch is not as good as you would want it to be. So I like to have a clear idea of what I want to sketch first and foremost, and so what I'm doing here is I'm sketching out my sketch that I have thought out in my sketchbook ahead of time, and then I will do base layers of paint. I will show you how. I have this water brush that contains water and that I just put some acrylic ink inside of. I like to do a base layer of hot pink acrylic ink. It's an ink by Liquitex. I don't know why I'm addicted to this sort of base layer. I found that when I have a base layer that's the same color for the whole drawing, it just gives a consistency to the paintings that I do. It just gives them more depths also, because when you have to scan or when you look at a painting that's watercolor, if there is only one layer, it just looks a little bit flat, and having a hot pink base layer just gives a little bit more depth to the painting. And so I do it not with an opaque layer of acrylic ink. I dilute it with water quite a bit, but I'm gonna build up on the layers and I'm gonna try and add even more depth. Now I have to let the acrylic ink dry. A new step that I've recently added is that I use this chocolate brown Jacquard ink to make kind of a black and white, but with different hues of brown base drawing painting, and it just, I don't know, ever since I've started doing this, I quite like it. I haven't done it in the series of painting garden gnomes, but I've tested it out in many other paintings since, and I just love. First of all, when you mix brown with other paints, it just makes the other paints slightly more dull, but also more deep is the only word that I can think of today. More deep. The word depth is a word that you're gonna hear a lot today, but it helps with learning which values are where. I like it. I like using this. Also, it makes the painting more cohesive. Also, it just gives it more depth. It's the only word that I can think of today, apparently. I love the consistency that it gives, and so I will leave some parts with only the pink, so these will be the parts where there is the most light in the painting. And then the thing that you have to keep in mind is that this ink is not acrylic ink, so it is watercolor ink, which means that the base layer, the hot pink base layer that I painted, was acrylic ink. And when I put water on top of it, once it's dry, it will not reactivate, it will not move. But this base layer, second base layer of chocolate brown, is gonna move because it is watercolor ink. So when I put water on it over again, it will move. So it serves two purposes. The first purpose is to help me figure out the light in the painting, like which parts are really dark and which are really light. And the second thing it helps me do is that it will mix with my paints that I put on top of it, and it will give them an edge, an interesting edge. It will give them more cohesion because there will be the same color mixed in all of the paintings. all the paints, and it'll give them this cohesion and just change up the colors just quite a little bit, just to make them a little bit more interesting. I don't know, I'm not talking very well today, but I'll leave you with that. That is my whole technique. You have to wait for the paints to dry before you do all the layers, and that is, I think, maybe the most annoying, difficult thing with watercolor is when you're used to not having to wait for things to dry. It's very frustrating. It can be very frustrating having to wait for things to dry. I don't know. I don't have what's the name of the thing you use to dry your hair? A hair dryer? I don't have a hair dryer, so I can't speed this process up. But what I usually do is I will stop and do something else while the thing is drying, and it's worked out pretty well for me, except for when I lose myself on Instagram and scrolling instead of doing something useful while I'm waiting. But yeah, that's the gist of it. I don't know if you try using this technique. I haven't invented it. I mean, it's nothing fancy or new, but now you know how I make my paintings, and I hope this helps some of you, maybe.